So we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for coming to this session. So glad to see you here, and I hope everyone is having a wonderful conference. My name is Stacy Torian. I am one of the co-organizers of this conference, and I am going to be moderating two presentations today. The first is going to be Culture of Creative Collaboration, and our presenters will be Jeff McAdams and Savannah Lake of UNC Charlotte. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you to please remain muted to reduce background noise. We are recording this session, and we have enabled live captioning. If you need to hide captions, you can choose hide subtitle on the live transcript menu at the bottom of the screen. And if you want to submit questions, you can submit those in the chat box. We'll get to those at the end of the session. And if you want to submit privately, you can submit questions directly to me. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Jeff McAdams and Savannah Lake for their presentation, Culture of Creative Collaboration. And let me go ahead and highlight you two. Should have spotlighted myself, I just realized, but that's okay. You know, you really want to see. Just 1 second.
I can go ahead and get those slides up there.
Great,
Thanks,
thank
Savannah.
you.
Well, hello, everyone. This presentation is called Culture of Collaborative Creation. I'm Jeff McAdams, the engineering librarian, and my co-presenter is Savannah Lake, the digital scholarship coordinator. We're both at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. We'll start off with the land acknowledgement. The University of North Carolina, Charlotte is located on the traditional territories of the Catawba, Waxhaw, Chiraw, Wateree, and Sugaree peoples, and as many of us are settlers, migrants, or descendants of those forcefully brought to this land, we are here because this land is colonized. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Catawba, Chiraw, Sugaree, Wateree, and Waxhaw peoples community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. And we have a link to the UNC Charlotte land acknowledgement in the slides. Thanks for having us today. I'm here to talk about something we don't normally like to talk about, is using Zoom as a tool. I know a lot of people have Zoom fatigue over the last several years. There's a lot of negative impressions of having meetings on Zoom, and there's just a lot of frustration sometimes doing work through Zoom. But we're here to talk about some positives of it and how we can and how we've had a positive experience with it. So what our goal for this presentation is to talk about how we can make Zoom as a meeting tool more productive and creative and relaxed and less exhausting and isolating and dull. And what we've done is just organically come up with a process that we found works for us for some collaborations. So our approach, basically, and it's very simple, is to use Zoom for synchronous, which is one of the key things, synchronous co-working sessions. And they're unstructured, they're creative, everything is collaborative, everyone is very participatory in it, and they're driven by some real discrete goal of creating some resource or something like that. And another thing is, and I forgot if we're going to get into this later, but they're very limited numbers of people. So we did 2 to 4 people, so that was a manageable group. So in Atkins Library at UNC Charlotte, we began these out of the Scholarly Communications Committee. One day after one of the committee's meetings, which we had hybrid, some people were left standing around, and we were talking about one of the things that we wanted to accomplish in the meeting, and we were like, how are we going to do that? So we said, let's just, the three of us, get on a Zoom meeting to discuss it. And what came out of it was a whole bunch of things, and it wasn't just those three people. There was different people from different departments came in and came out of different products that we made. We made a copyright guide, a lit guide, along with a downloadable PDF on how to publish research and outreach materials such as slides. We made a guide on how to publish open access, and also a proposal and outreach materials for a change to a grant application system. And we also reviewed the language on our institutional repository website. And all of these things we did with teams of different people. Again, it was between 2 to 4 people, where we would put calendar invites and work at the same time synchronously. And some of these took as little as 2 meetings to accomplish. Some of them took 4 or 5, but they were all, kind of a joy to accomplish. And this is more than we created all of this within like I want to say 1 semester. So it was a lot of productivity that we normally didn't have before.
All right. So here's just kind of like the nuts and bolts of what these Zoom co-working sessions can look like and what can be created for them. So we thought, for an example, we would share our copyright guide for the institutional repository, which is essentially, for folks who want to deposit something in our institutional repository, but they're not sure, if their article or their book chapter might have some sort of conflict with copyright, so they're not sure if they're able to post it. We wanted to create a resource that they could use in kind of like something akin to a checklist, so they can kind of evaluate if they can in fact deposit their work. So for this kind of small group project, there were 3 of us. There was the copyright and licensing librarian. There was the engineering librarian, which is Jeff, who's on this call, and then myself as the digital scholarship coordinator. And so as you can see, all 3 of us are coming at this issue from very different backgrounds. So Kate, our copyright librarian, obviously has the copyright expertise. She knows author contracts. She knows how to advise folks on that. Jeff, as the engineering librarian, is the one who's actually getting the feedback from faculty. So he's the one fielding questions about the IR and about copyright. So he was able to kind of speak to the user experience of using our institutional repository, as well as, Jeff does a lot of work with open access generally. So he was able to bring that background. And then myself, as the digital scholarship coordinator, I manage the IR. So I, understand what goes into a deposit. I know what resources we already have. So even though it's a small group, it was a mighty one. We all were able to kind of bring different expertise into it. And all it required was actually 2 co-working sessions. So it was 2 one-hour meetings where we all just kind of hopped on a Zoom without an agenda or anything, and kind of thought through, okay, what do we want from this and how do we get there? So, the first meeting, which was an hour, was a lot of just kind of like brainstorming what we want from it. And then the second meeting was when we actually started writing the content together. And we really did only work in these 2 meetings. We didn't work outside of them. And after we had the content, we sent it to the library's graphic designer, who was able to transform, a very plain Word document into something that people might actually want to use and read. And then as a final step, we shared it with the Scholarly Communications Committee, which we're all a part of, for feedback. So that's just kind of a snapshot of what this process can look like. And as Jeff said, over the past fall semester, we've done this, a number of times. You saw the bulleted list. So we kind of have an idea of what it does really well. And then, some considerations to have, maybe some kind of weak points of the process. So when we're thinking about strengths of working in these small projects, just synchronously on Zoom exclusively, What works really well, which we saw with a copyright guide, for example, is just kind of the spontaneity of ideation. So getting, a small group of people into the same room in a kind of very fluid and relaxed way meant that we could brainstorm in a really generative way. Another strength of this format, which I wasn't anticipating, but was so grateful for, is that it really made us kind of accountable to the work. So I know personally, I have a lot of projects that I do more independently, and I'll even put calendar holds to make sure that it gets done. But if I'm having a busier day, I'll just push the calendar hold, a week forward, and it can kind of create some anxiety where, there's projects that you want to get done, but you just feel like there are too many emails or too much stuff going on in your day to actually get them done. But because, these meetings are scheduled on multiple calendars, you actually do them, which means you actually make progress on these projects that are really important and it can actually help our users. So it's a good way to make sure that concrete steps are actually being taken on this work. Another strength is that it did allow for socializing in this remote or hybrid environment. They are very relaxed and kind of unstructured. And because it's a smaller group, it means you actually get to talk and visit with people in a way that maybe larger department or committee meetings might feel a little bit more formal, or you can't really get to connect with everyone. That's not so much the case with these smaller group meetings. And then kind of building on the whole idea of spontaneity of ideation, the collaborative boost, having the different expertise, the different experts in the room meant that these products, really operated on a yes and mentality, and they were so much better for it, and were informed by the different people in a way that if I were to independently, let's say, try to create that copyright guide, it wouldn't have been as strong of a product as it was because it was created with Jeff and Kate also in the room. And then finally, we found that Zoom, as compared with, let's say, if we were to do this collaborative kind of small group work in person, the Zoom format actually made it so that everyone felt a little less pressure and that they actually could participate. So even for staff that are generally a little more shy and don't speak up in these kind of group settings, because we weren't all sitting in the same room and looking at each other and saying, okay, what's your idea? Because it was remote and we were looking at a shared Google Doc instead of right at each other, we found that everyone actually participated and really collaborated on the project. And then as far as considerations, socializing was definitely a strength, but it could be seen a little bit as a weakness just because, every time we met, it did take some time to kind of ramp up and actually get to work because we were kind of catching up and talking with one another. Also, as far as scheduling, because you are scheduling across departments and different people, it did mean that sometimes, the next availability wasn't for another 2 or 3 weeks. So that, is something to consider. And then finally, because these are kind of unstructured and self-led, there is less oversight. There isn't, a manager telling you what to do or a supervisor. So it does mean that the people participating have to be a little bit more proactive. And then just some keys to making these Zoom co-working sessions work. Like we've said, the small group format was really helpful as opposed to a larger group in getting everyone to participate. Also, having people volunteer to be on these groups meant that people were genuinely interested and could do that kind of self-starter, lead the project along that maybe you wouldn't have as if a manager were to assign things. As far as the project themselves, having them deliverable driven was great because it made the projects very concrete and really fit the smaller project format. Also, having clear end dates meant that once the deliverable was created, the project was over, the group totally dissolved. So it was helpful for people with busier schedules because then they could kind of elect to what projects they wanted to work on. And then finally, some trends we saw with the projects that we did do was that they were very proactive. It wasn't reactive, trying to put out fires. These were all new things we wanted to create, and that allowed us to kind of create them without pressure or constraints. And the last thing was that we found flexible expectations were really helpful. So projects really evolved as we brainstormed together. So we were open to, let's say we're like, oh, we want to create this one resource, but as we brainstorm and talk through it, it turns out we needed 2 resources. Being open to that change was helpful, and also really suited the small project format, because that just meant that after this one ended, a new project would begin. So that's our presentation. We'd love to open it up for discussion.
And there was one last thing I wanted to mention, and Savannah and I were just talking about this today, about how, for me, my personality, I had a lot of less anxiety for these meetings because all the work happened in the meeting. So sometimes for me, some meetings I'm worried about, did I do enough prep work for the meeting, or am I organized enough or anything like that? By having all the work done, it's on your calendar, you're doing it in the meeting, there just wasn't anything for me to worry about. I could just show up and be myself and do the work with my other colleagues versus worrying about, did I get it done? So I just want to add that in, but please ask us any questions you have.
Thank you so much, Jeff and Savannah. And yes, please do feel free to ask questions in the Q&A, the chat box, and we will definitely address those.
Okay, so
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sure.
I was just going to read it. What platforms did you use beside Google Docs? Is a question. Jeff, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, yeah, thanks for the question. We do all of the work on our campus and through Google, whatever they call it, the G Suite. And so we've done Google Slides and Google Docs. And we submitted our Google Doc to our graphic designer who makes things into PDFs for us. We also use SpringShare for our LibGuides instance, and so one of the the LibGuides we created, we use that. But all of us have access to the same web-based application, so we would all be in the same thing at the same time, essentially.
And the website kind of like language audit, the usability review, that was just us looking at our institutional repositories website and just kind of scrolling through it and collaboratively just making sure the language was as user-friendly as possible.
And to be honest, that's a real good point, that we did screen share a lot, which even though we could all be in the same Google Doc, oftentimes it was one of us who was typing and taking notes while other people are talking and thinking freely. So a lot of the typing and organizing of it was just to capture things, and then the next time we clean it up together. But a lot of times it would just be watching somebody do it instead of having multiple people type at once.
We're at about time. So if you all have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me or Jeff. We'd love to talk about it. It's really encouraging that we found a way to make Zoom like looking forward to a Zoom meeting. So definitely feel free to reach out.
Yeah. And thanks for having us, and thanks for listening. We appreciate it, everybody here.
Thank you so much. It's always good to hear about people having fun on Zoom, like the social part of it. Okay, so we're going to move right along here. Let's get our spotlight set up. We've got a lot of people in this session. I'm having a little trouble finding some of the people. So just give me 1 second. All right. So for those of you who are just joining us, thank you so much for this, for coming to this session. This session is titled Staff Wellbeing, and our presenters are going to be Nadia Clifton and Jennifer Jean-Baptiste of UNC Chapel Hill. We ask that you remain muted during the session. This session is being recorded and live captioning has been enabled. So if you want, you can hide the captions by choosing Hide Subtitle on the live transcript menu at the bottom of the screen. And feel free to submit your questions via chat if you have questions. So, welcome, Nadia and Jennifer.
Thanks, Stacy. Sharing my screen. Does that look okay? Can you see notes or it looks good? Okay,
Looks good.
awesome. So as Stacy said, my name is Nadia Clifton. I'm the Special Collections Engagement Librarian at UNC Chapel Hill. And I'll let Jennifer introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Jean-Baptiste, and I work in Human Resources at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And today we will be presenting on staff well-being. So to begin, I will review the roadmap for today's presentation. We'll review starting off a wellness program at UNC Libraries. We will also review the wellness benefits, what our programming looks like, what's been working, what hasn't been working, our outcomes, our plans moving forward, as well as tips and takeaways that you can provide for your organization. So there are many great wellness benefits to including a wellness initiative, a wellness program into your organization. We have found firsthand that having a wellness initiative builds connection and cohesion with staff. It helps improve overall health, whether that be physical, mental, spiritual. And the key to this is offering a diversified list of events for staff to attend. We all go through seasons of life where we're stressed out, and we definitely learned that firsthand through the pandemic. So by having a list of diversified events, we help equip our staff for those stressful times. And wellness events do not need to be cookie cutter. You can customize them to the staff needs. And due to the pandemic, our events have been hosted mostly virtually, which allows our staff members to interact with one another who on the daily may not get to interact if it was in person, because there are different libraries on campus and different departments. So it's a great way to get our staff to interact with one another. And as many people learned firsthand, the pandemic has brought isolation to many. So by having these different wellness events, it helps those who are experiencing isolation not feel isolated as they're interacting with staff members. So how did it all start? So I began with UNC Chapel Hill in October of 2019. At the time, Lisa Ruth was our director of HR, and in the beginning of 2020, she had sat me down and asked me if I'd be interested in leading a wellness initiative within the libraries. So along with my HR background, I do come from the fitness industry. So fitness and wellness has always been a huge passion of mine. So I was super excited that she had come with the idea of bringing a wellness program to the libraries. So in the beginning of 2020, I also met with Jessica, who's our campus wellness manager, of how we can begin this initiative within the library organization and what we needed to do to roll this out. So she recommended that I become a wellness champion for the university libraries. A wellness champion is just a staff member that represents the organization's wellness initiative to the campus as a whole. And once the pandemic hit, we felt even more urgency to bring this wellness initiative to the libraries faster. So this whole, I laid out this whole strategic plan and initiative, but we had to hit the ground running and change what was already laid out because everything was moving virtual at this time. So our wellness team consisted of staff from leadership, communications, librarians, and HR. And as I mentioned, with the pandemic, we had to hit the ground running. And thanks to Nadia, she came on board and became a wellness champion with me. And we were really able to create such a successful program together. And we officially became a committee in the spring of 2021. At first, we weren't able to get approval for a committee, so we were just calling ourselves the wellness team. But I am glad to announce that we are officially a wellness committee. And so, like I said, a lot of our programs are, well, all of our programs still are virtual. And with this wellness initiative, we host 1 to 2 wellness events a month for our staff to attend. So we're just going to review some of the programming that we do. So we understand that all staff may not have the time to join a wellness event. Our wellness events typically are 30 to 60 minutes long, but everyone has meetings throughout the week, or they may have something going on to where they can't attend a wellness event. So we've come up with some asynchronous activities that we've hosted for staff, whether it be photo competitions, whether it be gratitude board. And our gratitude board is typically around Thanksgiving, where staff members get to fill out what they're thankful for. And then we just list it for an uplifting activity for staff to go through and read. We've also held bullet journaling activities. Nadia will talk about this a little bit later, but our program is one of the leading wellness initiatives on campus. So campus at one point did provide us with some funding. So we were able to purchase some bullet journals, and that was an item that we were able to use for this session, and we were able to provide bullet journals for our staff. We also have held a crowdsourced recipe collection where we had our staff members submit recipes, and our leadership had put those recipes together into a recipe book. And because of the pandemic, we are unable to have our staff barbecue. So our leadership team provided a recipe book for all the staff members with recipes that were submitted by our staff members. So here's another list of our activities. These are webinars with expert instructors. So we have teamed up with ComPsych as a wellness initiative. We are provided with tokens from ComPsych, which we can in return have these sessions, and we've held sessions for improving your finances, managing worry. We've had goal setting sessions. And with ComPsych is an extension of the EAP program. And so these sessions are confidential. The only ones that see who are attending the ComPsych session is ComPsych themselves, as well as me. So these sessions do require pre-registration. And so we do know who submitted registration for these events, but again, only ComPsych sees that, and myself. We've also held Umbud sessions throughout I think the 2 during the pandemic. And this was great. This was just a confidential area where staff members can come and talk about the pandemic, how they're feeling, what their hopes are for the future. We've also had yoga with Rhoda. So this program has really allowed us to network across campus and have different staff members from across campus with expertise come present and come host events for our staff. So Rhoda was a yoga instructor. She is a yoga instructor, and she has hosted some events for us. We also have meditation sessions with our own Nadia in the libraries, which is a huge benefit. And Nadia does host those weekly, and those are part of our ongoing meetup groups. And we've also had Dr. Johnny Gherkin come in from the School of Medicine Psychiatry, who's hosted a meditation and spoke about meditation to our staff as well. So now at this point, our programming has been going on for almost 2 years. And because this program has become so, I almost want to say like self-running in the sense of, that these programs, our staff members have been able to host events. They get very interested in what we're providing to the staff, and they've actually come to me, Nadia, the wellness committee, and asked us to host their own events. So some of our most well-attended events are the events that are held by leadership. We've had Making Kombucha with Elaine, where we've had over 40 staff members attend. Our food events are very well attended as well. We've had baking sessions, cooking lessons. We've had coffee breaks where staff members can just come virtually, have a cup of coffee, and get to talk to one another about their day or with a certain topic. We've had happy hours. Right now, we're in March Madness brackets, which is all across the libraries, and it's led by our one and only AJ Dean in IT. He brings some great energy to the libraries, and the March Madness bracket has been a lot of fun. We have ongoing meetup groups. We have walking groups, our weekly meditations with Nadia. We've also had scavenger hunts, the string theory. So there's been many different events that have been going on throughout the libraries. Now I'm going to pass it over to Nadia, and she's going to explain what's been working, what hasn't been working, and some of the outcomes of our initiative.
Thanks, Jennifer. So now you all have an idea of what our programming looks like, and we're turning to how it's going, as Jennifer said. So we've settled on at least 2 events per month, and sometimes things pop up that we'll promote, but when we're planning, we aim for 2 a month. We haven't started in-person events yet, and many of us are working hybrid schedules right now, so we can't all attend virtually. So we're recording events when it makes sense to do so, and also try to have asynchronous components when possible. So for example, when I host a walking scavenger hunt, I'll make the list available to anybody who wants it, even if they're not joining us at the appointed time. Feedback is really important for assessment. And at the beginning we had of the pandemic in our wellness team, we had a rather full feedback form that we gave to hosts. And we found that was kind of a lot for people. So we've now switched to trying a very short form for attendees. And we'll just give that like at the very last few minutes at the end of an event. And it's optional and anonymous. And we'll do it just has 2 questions. So about how the event contributes to their sense of wellness and their sense of connection. And they'll just rate it 1 to 5 stars. And then there's just a comment section. So it takes less than 3 minutes to fill out. So we still get feedback and it's not too taxing on people's time. And having diverse events works really well for us. So different topics and different formats. That means you can reach a lot more people because everybody has different interests and ways in which they want to participate. And then we've also found that increasing communication channels and sending out announcements and reminders is helpful for participants because people get their information we've found in different places. So having them in different places is helpful so people know what's going on. And what's working in terms of the popularity of our events. So for the time of day, we found that 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. work really well. Food events are very popular, and so are events that are led by leadership. And things to watch out for that we found. So if events are scheduled too early or too late in the day, it's harder for people to come. Back-to-back submission events we've found. So we don't, excuse me. So like if we do a gratitude board, like that Jennifer said in November, and then we have a holiday decoration showcase in December, we found that too many contributions, we don't get as many. So that's something to watch out for. And then also our events are still virtual right now and people are still, Zoom fatigue is still a thing. So we make sure to have active events like the scavenger hunts and yoga where people get up and get away from their computer. And that's helpful as well. Onto some outcomes that we've seen from our programs. This includes an increased sense of communication, community and connection between staff members across the libraries. We have like 12 main library buildings and over 200 staff members. And so it's good to see each other when we've been away for so long, but we also make connections with colleagues from other library buildings, as Jennifer said earlier. We've seen that staff have begun reaching out to us with ideas for events, and Jennifer mentioned that as well. So at first we would generate an event idea and ask staff members to host it. And some of that still happens, but now we have a lot of staff volunteering to host events and teach colleagues about topics in which they're interested, which is really cool. And we've also become, as Jennifer said, the leading wellness committee within the Wellness Champions program. And our program is we're so consistent and have such a diverse number and type of events that we like to share them with the other wellness champions on campus, and also promote their events and programs when appropriate. And we also wanted to share some feedback that we've had from staff. And so we've just pulled 2 quotes, and I'll read. The first one says, "Yoga was great, very relaxing. I'm glad that the library sponsored it during work hours and that I had the time to attend." And so this quote really highlights how meaningful it is that we and library leadership make it clear that these events do count as work time, because it's important that our staff feel good. And our second quote is a little longer, and it's from a Bring Your Pet to Work event that we did in January, just this January. And this participant said, "One of the silver linings of the pandemic is that we can do things like this that would never have happened or been conceived in the before times. I never would have guessed how many coworkers have pets, and to meet them on screen like this. These fill in the edges of our understanding of each other. So it was really good for connecting on other levels. Thanks for doing this one." And this quote really emphasizes the sense of connection that we're aiming for. And we even had 2 staff members saw each other's dogs, and they're like, "Hey, we live on the same street. I've seen you walking your dog." And it was just this really fun, magical moment of connection between people who hadn't known each other, known that they live near each other. And so very quickly, moving forward, some of our short-term and long-term goals. Of course, first we want to work on increasing participation. And during the stay-at-home portion of the pandemic, when we started, it was really easy, and folks felt like an immediate need to participate. And now that we're back to more usual work patterns, it's harder for people to come, or they feel like they have to get their work done and they can't come. So we're working on that. Also constantly working on diversifying topics and formats. So for example, we're looking into including community service opportunities, and also of course towards hybrid events. So starting to do things safely and comfortably in person. And for our long-term goals, we want to start a central well-being blog. So like an easy place, or Teams. We use Microsoft Suite, so maybe a Teams or something, but just a central place for communications to be sent and where events can be found, because it is nice to have different places to communicate, because people find their information on different places, but also just having an easy place to get to where everyone knows they can find information. Wellbeing presence on our library's public website. So similar to the way our reckoning and idea work is featured. So because if wellbeing is, to be embedded in our culture, we want it to be obvious to everyone. And someday dream is to have a fully integrated wellbeing program with a funded position in person to lead it, not just a committee. And so finally, we're just to wrap up with tips and takeaways if you're interested in a wellness initiative for your library, for your colleagues, for your workplace. So first, don't be afraid to ask for leadership involvement. Leadership being involved makes for a more successful initiative. Make sure to recruit a diverse team for your committee. Invite colleagues to host or lead a program. You may discover that your staff, your colleagues have hidden talents, which is always really fun. Incorporate variety. So remember that people in different circumstances have different needs. Take initiative, voice your ideas, and be open to ideas from others. And finally, have fun with it. I know Libraryland has a lot of committees, and this is one of the few that is truly fun and enjoyable to be on. So we'll open the floor real quick for questions, and thank you all for attending. I think we might have. String theory, we have a question. What is string theory? It's one of our meetup groups. And so they work on, I think, like crocheting and knitting and other like string crafts together.
I wanted to ask real quickly if you had a chance to talk about, what you got out of this, and how this impacted you, this work.
Jennifer, would you like to go? I've been talking for a while.
Sure. So Honestly, it has been really nice getting to work with just staff members across campus. And as Nadia had mentioned, that initially it was also us reaching out to staff members with different ideas, asking them to host. But watching staff members become engaged and watching and just receiving different feedback of how the program has been making an impact on them as a staff member. And something that I'll never forget, one of the staff members had brought up in one of the sessions. It was just like, it's so nice that we're able to be someone outside of an employee. We're able to bring ourselves. We're able to bring our emotions. We're able to admit that we're human outside of just work and have those conversations. So that has been really rewarding, and just seeing staff come together, laugh together, get to work together. They normally wouldn't be able to work together. And I will say this, like, a wellness committee does not have to be, a bunch of staff members that are so passionate or so involved in fitness. We want diversified ideas. We want different backgrounds. We want others to come together. And I really feel like we did a really good job with that with our committee, having individuals from different backgrounds, different passions come together and make our committee so successful.
I know we're at time, but I wanted to say, Nancy said she got to lead a couple wellness programs during COVID work from home and really had a lot of fun. And it helped her feel connected with a lot of colleagues across campus. Yeah, I think the same for me. Like, I really love my colleagues, and I want them to feel well and be well. And it lifts me up when I get to help provide that for them.
Well, thank you so much, both of you. It was really wonderful and inspiring presentation. And thank you to everyone that attended, and continue to enjoy the conference and the rest of your day, and take care.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you. Thank you to all the presenters.